So Mac Miller's final studio album, Circles, has finally dropped. Just before I get into the bulk of the review, I should start by saying, just for sake of clarity, that whilst I personally always saw Mac as an incredibly humble and creative person, I was never an overt fan of his. Not because I hated his music or anything. I just hadn't taken the time to go out and actively explore his deeper cuts and his deeper music. Before I listened to Circles, I did take the time to go back and revisit certain albums. Before this, I'd only heard The Divine Feminine and Swimming. So I went back, I listened to Good AM, Watching Movies with the Sound Off, re-listened to Swimming, and re-listened to The Divine Feminine as well. Going into this album, I was very hopeful that it's always a bit difficult when it comes to dealing with posthumous releases, and what tends to happen is labels and producers get like the bare bones of an idea for a song and just stretch it out. I think that was the case with the last X album, Bad Vibes Forever. You could tell that, and through no fault of X's, he's been dead for almost 2 years now, that they'd taken just these very loose ideas for songs and just stretched them out so thin where it's at times kind of incoherent. But what I'm glad to say about Circles is that it doesn't feel like that in the slightest. It feels very organic. It feels like a full and complete album. So I also have to give props to John Bryan, who came on and finished the production for Mac, and it's done extremely tastefully. So I'm just going to get into this just track by track. Opening song is Circles. It's a very mellow, meditative song, and I think it sets the sonic palette and theme for the album very well. It's very bittersweet. The lyrics are kind of tragic, especially when you have the context of Mac's unfortunate passing. They're quite moving and prophetic as well at times, and I think it's a perfect mood setter for the rest of Circles. And you get to the next song, which is Complicated, and this song kind of continues the theme of him trying to navigate his way through his own mind and his own life to try and find solutions for different issues and problems that he's facing in his life. Of course, the clear example of that is where he says, "I'm way too young to be getting old." The fusion of R&B, funk and electro synth stuff is done, I think, very tastefully on Complicated as well. Now we get to the song Blue World, and in my humble opinion, I think this is maybe one of the best songs I've ever heard of Mac's, period. The instrumental, courtesy of Guy Lawrence, who's one half of Disclosure, is very trippy, bouncy, it's full of life, it's very fitting considering the lyrical themes of the album. This song is also where Mac starts to bring in some existentialism to his writing as well. He's concerned about his existence and the nature of existence and his relationship with those close to him and those who are not so close to him as well. I think the stand-up bar from this is, "See, I was in the whip riding me and my bitch. We was listening to us, no one else. That's it. That's a flex, just a bit. Let me talk my shit." That is a stand-up bar. That is probably my favorite bar on the entire album. We get to the song Good News, which is probably one of the most, if not the most, moving and emotional songs in the album. In this song, it seems like he's discussing his relationship with his fan base and his role as an entertainer and what that entails for him personally. It's a very personal song, it's very vulnerable, and it's very captivating as well. Then we get the next song, which is I Can See. Again, it's very dreamlike instrumental. It's got these beautiful string arrangements as Mac continues diving deep into these existential themes that are becoming more and more prominent as the album goes on. Then we get to the song Everybody. When I first heard it, it sounded like it could be like an old Beatles song with the kind of instrumental arrangements and the way Mac is singing. And then I learned that it was a cover of an Arthur Lee song called Everybody's Gotta Live. Admittedly, I wasn't familiar with the source material at first, so I went back and listened to that song, and it kind of gives it a new context. Mac has taken this song and given it like a whole new meaning and a whole new vibe. And I think that's the purpose of a cover. You're not just meant to repeat the original. You add your own spin and your own flavor, and Mac's definitely done that here. And I think on this song, it's probably the best singing I've heard Mac do. As far as I've heard him, it's very, very strong. Again, when you look at the lyrical content of Everybody, it is again eerily prophetic and moving. But the point is, he takes this original source material and takes it to a whole different place and gives it a whole new meaning. Woods is probably the most overtly R&B inspired track on the entire album. When I look at the lyrics of this song, I can see that there's an immense amount of perspective and a down-to-earth nature about Mac that I can see has been apparent throughout his entire career. Again, there's a lot of bittersweetness all over the album, and I think the one lyric that encapsulates that perfectly on this song is where he says, "Hate, love, heartbreak will have you bankrupt. Too many days in a days, better wake up." And I do one more thing on Woods, is that I love the kind of ethereal, otherworldly ambient sounds that are like whooshing in the background. It adds to the song so well. The song Hand Me Downs is, the focus of the song for me is Mac trying to navigate the different ways he chooses to cope with different things and different issues in his life. The vibe I get from this is it's a very, very sincere and genuine longing for something that is so simple at the end of the day, and that is human companionship. What makes this song particularly bittersweet is that the lyrics indicate that Mac was on the up when it came to his personal well-being and his mental health, and even his issues with substances as well. That's On Me was probably the most surprising song in the track list when I first heard Circles, and that's because the instrumental sounds like an indie folk song. It sounds like an old Fleet Foxes song to my ear. The hook is probably the catchiest on the entire album. I still can't get it out of my head. It's a very, very colourful and expressive song, and I think it indicates something that's very, very important when it comes to music, and that's that it shows how powerful simple honesty and a lack of pretentiousness can be when it comes to making music. Again, this song continues that bittersweet theme that's going on throughout the album, and I think in this song it's bittersweet even before you consider the context of Mac's unfortunate passing. Song Hands is the most straightforward traditional rap song on the album. It's still very wonderful and whimsical and optimistic like the rest of the album though. This is probably where he most explicitly addresses his issues with substance abuse, particularly where he says, "I'm busy tripping about some shit that didn't even happen yet." And I think that poetically distills the nature of anxiety brought on by substance abuse. And I think the stand-up bar for me on this song is where Max says, "You throw me off my high horse, I'd probably fall to death." And the reason that this one stands out to me is because, like, kind of counterintuitively, it's a bar referencing his own inflated ego. But I think to make such a statement, you have to have a certain amount of humility to have that perspective, to recognize your own ego. And I think that's a brilliantly poetic bar. The penultimate song, Surf, opens very, very simply with Mac tastefully singing over a simple and single but tasteful guitar line. The lyrics are very, very romantic and confessional as well. It's a very, very hopeful and optimistic track in my opinion. And again, this is another song where he is holding his own vocally. He sounds very, very good as a vocalist. And then the album closes with Once a Day, and like the way the album opened, it's very, very quiet and mellow and meditative. It's a very, very, again, optimistic and hopeful track centered around the theme of learning to work through your issues and get to a point where you do to appreciate and love yourself. It's almost like a session of self-therapy and vocally working through your own issues to find any solution that you can. I think it's somewhat comforting for any fans and Mac's family as well to have the final word from Mac be one of optimism and him looking forward. And I think that's something that would bring a great amount of people some sort of closure, if you can call it that. I do think it's very, very tricky to get posthumous albums done right. But when you have an artist such as Mac, who was clearly very dedicated to his work and very, very dedicated to progressing his art, and then you bring on a producer of John Bryan's immense quality, you should be getting quality music, and I think that's exactly what we've got here. Personally, even for me, even as someone who wasn't a die-hard Mac Miller fan, but I could see the talent and the way he touched people, even for me, this album was particularly moving at times. So I can only imagine that those who are Mac's friends and family and his die-hard fans would find this an incredibly moving and quality listen as well. I think given the context of the music and how this came to fruition, I don't think we could have hoped for a better album than this, in my opinion. I do genuinely think that this album was an indicator that Mac was just about to hit his artistic peak, and it's that fact that makes this listen so bittersweet and so tragic.